A few weeks ago, I reviewed Desert Commander, a tactical strategy game in the ilk of the ever-popular Wars series that graced the Game Boy Advance about a decade ago. Today's game is somewhat similar. Conflict is set during the Cold War and explores the hypotheticals of combat between the Western Bloc, or capitalist countries, against the Eastern Bloc, or communist countries. In short, the United States versus the Soviet Union. The Cold War was a tense standoff that lasted pretty much from the end of World War II until its dissolution in the late 80s. The symbolic end of the Cold War took place on November 9, 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell after mass protests in East Germany. Oddly, this game released 4 months after the Cold War had essentially ended and the period of conflict had passed. But let's see what's up. Conflict is a hex-tile-based tactical strategy game. The premise is to conquer your opponent and claim their territory, but there's a lot more beneath the surface. You start with factories that not only manufacture your warplanes, tanks, and transports, but also train your troops. You get 2 or 3 of these to start, but you unfortunately can only produce 1 unit per turn. There's a hidden mechanic at play here though, and it's through a system that uses fame points, or FP. FP determines the type of units you can produce in the factories, and you gain FP by occupying a town, airport, or winning a battle. FP becomes an important commodity for defeating your opponent, especially versus the computer, since you always start with less FP than the CPU. This leads you to having to make up the gap in your material disadvantage, so you need to deplete the enemy's FP as soon as possible by being aggressive. You can move each unit a predetermined amount of space depending on the type they are. For example, planes can move further than infantry in a single turn. The number of units you can move each turn is something you choose at the beginning. The game recommends you choose to move only 3 units per turn as opposed to all. Not only does it make the game a little easier to manage when you're starting out, it also moves things along a lot quicker. Moving just 3 units and watching the computer move 3 units is better than when each side has at least 10 units each. The hexagons introduce different terrains like plains, forests, mountains, seas, and, well, nothing. As expected though, the game's visual appeal doesn't come from the map, it comes from the cutscenes for battle. When an enemy unit is adjacent to your unit, you can engage in battle, and this is where it can get confusing. The game uses shorthand to refer to the commands available, and it helps to refer to this diagram in the manual when defending yourself. It's all trial and error, and unfortunately for a game like this that takes so long to get rolling, frustrations can mount quickly if each trial leads to error. The good thing, I guess, is that if you want to skip the burden of micromanaging battles and you'd rather manage the units and placements of units instead, you can do that and let the computer fight for you. Plus, it's not like your own whiz-kid strategies guarantee success anyway, as the game rolls the dice for the outcomes of your decisions. The neat thing is everything plays out visually and via text in the middle window, so you can set up a battle and then watch it go. It's a lazy way out, but I found it to be kind of neat. If you're interested in playing this one, having the manual on hand is strongly advised. The game goes much deeper than I'm describing. For starters, there's the basic advantage/disadvantage relationship between each unit, and then there's the inside baseball statistics of each unit type, which may or may not come in handy depending on how serious you take the game. Beyond that, there's a table that breaks down those advantages and disadvantages in much greater detail. If you like a game that lets you get into the nitty-gritty minutia, here you go. So, while this game certainly won't appeal to most people due to its slow and plodding grind, the game remarkably does exactly what it sets out to do. If you have the desire to engage in some tedious 8-bit military slap fights, then Conflict can draw up several with its 16 different maps to choose from, each with a different degree of difficulty. If you're looking for a casual experience, I'd still say Desert Commander is probably more up your alley, but Conflict is worth a shot if you're packing a manual. There was a sequel called Super Conflict that came out in the US for the Super Nintendo 3 years later. Instead of the Cold War, Super Conflict is based on the Gulf War, but the scenarios still feel very Cold War. Everything is upgraded visually as you'd expect, and the game introduces 2 modes, one short form and one long form, which are nice options to have. Well, that does it for Conflict on the NES. Thanks for watching, and if you like listening, try out my gaming podcast Polykill. It's everywhere podcasts are found.